The Bataclan does remind us of many things in the most dreadful fashion, doesn't it? Not least the idea that playing dead served the people who were trying to do it in Paris no good at all.
Yes, I mean, some of the details that have not been released about what happened in the Bataclan are pretty horrific. But I think it only emphasizes the fact that, unfortunately, if you're in the path of a terrorist, they're going to show very little mercy and they're going to cause as many fatalities and casualties as they can.
Do you think we seem to have this difference of approach between America and the UK when it comes to what the official guidance is to people who find themselves in a dreadful situation like the Bataclan?
Well, yes, I mean, from the UK's point of view, we're slightly less sort of robust as the States in terms of it is number one in both run. That is your key objective. And it doesn't matter how brave or tough you might think you are. You just don't know what these individuals may have on them. And there are a number of instances where they have had what were believed to be suicide devices on them, but turned out to be dummies. You don't know if they will have a genuine device, and if you do try and tackle them, you could end up actually causing yourself more harm. However, it's always going to be a personal decision. Telling, obviously, the authorities is absolutely key. Because then they can respond with the specialist units, as we saw certainly in the Borough Market attack and London Bridge attack. But fighting back will always be a personal choice. Some people will do it, some people may not be able to do it, and they will simply freeze.
The official attitude seems to be to discourage it. Now, I wonder if that's always right. I mean, Saturday's the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Flight United 93 would have either probably hit the Capitol building in America or the White House, and the fact it didn't is in a large part due to the efforts of people like Todd Beamer, who famously suggested it was time to roll as they attacked the cockpit, sufficiently successfully to bring that plane down and save potentially thousands of lives. We can think of examples closer to home. You mentioned Borough Market. Here's another, the Thalys train from Brussels that was going to Paris. There was a gunman aboard one carriage. He was determined, we think, to kill as many people as possible, an Islamist gunman. Unfortunately, he didn't realise there were a couple of American GIs on that plane who, with the help of at least one Brit, brought him down and stopped him committing mass murder. Sometimes it helps to intervene, to be a have-a-go hero.
No, absolutely, and I can't question that. I think in the case of United 93, the passengers had obviously communications with their families. They were made aware of the bigger picture and what was going on, that the towers had been struck, the Pentagon had been struck, I think, at that stage, and therefore they knew that they had no alternative. They were either going to go down in the plane in some horrible, disaster, or they were going to do the best they could to try and retrieve the situation as best they could. On the train, obviously, those guys were former military. So they were slightly better equipped and maybe, in terms of mindset, let alone physically, to deal with the situation. I mean, it really does, Colin, come down to the circumstances and situation. I mean, if someone is cornered, you can't escape, you can't hide, you can't get out of the situation. Inevitably, your only choice, it will be to fight back. I mean, and I know that certainly in my instances, I certainly would. And I know many people who would also do so, if not just to protect themselves, but to protect the other people around them.
What I'm trying to do, Will, I mean, you use the word mindset. I think what I'm trying to do is question the extent to which the state seeks to shape that mindset. I mean, so for instance, here's another example. John Smeaton, I remember being in Glasgow for a few days when a couple of Islamists in a Jeep tried to ram the front of the airport in Glasgow. To a large extent, they were stopped by the efforts of John Smeaton. He was a baggage handler. I think he was given the George Medal, the highest civilian award that can be given for bravery. Now, there's a question there about to what extent the state says we will encourage that kind of behaviour, John Smeaton's bravery, by awarding a medal, an award, maybe a cash reward, I don't know. But there is clearly an opportunity for the state to help shape thinking. And if people don't believe that, look at what happens, for instance, in a country like Israel. And I know that's quite a leap to go from here to Israel, where people fairly routinely are encouraged to take on people who would do them harm.
Yes, I mean, again, Israel's not a great example. Obviously, pretty much everybody goes through national service there. It will be, I think, down to the individual. I think the government turning around and saying to people, yes, you should actively engage and fight the terrorist, is perhaps kind of reprioritizing to the individual that fundamentally the first thing they need to do is run away or ultimately hide, but most importantly tell. I think the fight aspect is going to be spontaneous. Anybody who's been in a spontaneous violent situation, whether it be a street robbery or a mugging or an assault of some type, will have reacted accordingly in that situation. Whether they've been told to fight their way out of it or not is a difficult one to answer. Because it will be about pre-selected sort of decisions or ideas and down to the individual's personal makeup.
It just seems to me, Will, that the state doesn't want to go down this road. They don't even want to talk about it. They want to say, don't worry about it. It's not your gig. You've got no agency in this. Wait till the professionals arrived. They're armed. They'll take care of it. And I just wonder whether that's always appropriate. I mean, for instance, when we think back to the attack at Borough Market, again, we talk about the gruesome details, which don't always emerge until some time afterwards. The attackers, as I understand it, I'm sure you'll know more, Will, had strapped knives so that as they punched, the knives were strapped to their fists. Now, there are ways potentially you can stop that, or at least potentially stop that. You know, you start windmilling and try to block access to your sensitive areas. But if we're not going to talk about it, people can't even think about how they can behave prudentially.
Well, I think a lot of people would seek out sort of guidance from companies, and there's a lot of material out there that people can go to online, which will actually give them some kind of physical response measures that they can consider in a scenario. Now, obviously, the London Bridge attackers, the reason why they taped their knives to their hands was to make it far less easy for anybody to disarm them. Now, in terms of the Bataclan situation, now, yes, you and I probably know more detail than most of the viewers will as to the horrific sort of torturing and rifling through those that were trying to hide and masquerade that they were dead. I think it's a mistake to actually censor that information, because I think it doesn't equip the general public in the fullest sense as to what they could possibly face. And many of these terrorists, whether it be Al-Qaeda or Islamic State for that matter, will follow certain procedures, and they will have been told these are the things that you should do in each of these situations. And so, you know, the general public aren't better prepared as to knowing, my goodness, I can't fake being dead and get away with it, because they will be very rigorous about checking all the bodies to see if anybody's still alive, and then the consequences of someone if they are. So, you know, I agree with you. I am more of the robust mantra in terms of dealing with terrorists than I am necessarily, you know, the sort of hiding away. But each circumstance will, you know, and I'm sorry to repeat myself, Colin, you know, each circumstance will present its own, you know, particular quirks and, you know, situations and how you should deal with it best.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.